Welcome back and good afternoon to you. You are watching Newsfeed PM. Now let's take you back to the Cape Town International Convention Centre. Vuyo Mvoko is standing by to wrap up this morning's National Council of Provinces seating.
Thank you very much. We thought, well, at the end of what has been a marathon 2 sessions, perhaps 2 days, certainly better than yesterday, we should come where it ended this afternoon, and this is where the National Council of Provinces met today and ended, of course, the sitting of both houses of Parliament, the National Assembly yesterday, and today the National Council of Provinces. And with me is someone who has been with us throughout. We spent so much time together over the past 3 days, Asanda. And I want to start with taking you back to Thursday afternoon when everything was up in the air. We were trying to get as much information from everyone as possible, and very little was coming through. Do you feel you are in a better situation today than we were 3 days ago?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think just going back to Thursday, trying to figure out and find out what was actually happening. Was it a government of national unity? Which political parties were involved? And what had been traded for the deal to happen? And, it seemed like nobody was willing to give time. I remember even having a bit of an argument with you on Thursday about why it was that Fikile Mbalula had a whole press briefing, but there was nothing forthcoming. So I think it's becoming clearer that there is an emerging coalition that is mainly between the DA and the African National Congress, together with the IFP. But
I like your use of the word a coalition and not government of national unity, as the ANC would have us believe.
Well, I mean, I was going to finish off and say that, but it can still become a version of a government of national unity, because we've just come from the press briefing with the ANC, and they are saying that there are only 3 political parties that seem not to be interested at all in a government of national unity, but they didn't name which ones they are, but they're saying that the rest of the political parties seem to be falling in line, and they are going to spend the next week actually coming together and having those negotiations, so that by the time they brief us as South Africans, they have a fuller picture of who exactly.
But we knew that. I mean, coming here, we knew that many, if not most, of the political parties were quite keen to hear what the ANC is putting on the table. People were talking about little consultation. They were talking about lack of details and no real commitment to actually engage them. In other words, it seemed to many political party leaders that it was a box-ticking exercise, that the ANC was only interested in the Democratic Alliance and the IFP.
Well, I think, if you look at the numbers, they'll explain the reason why I think the ANC went with the DA, because going with the DA for them is what gave them Gauteng, and it's also what secured some form of government of national unity or coalition, depending on how you phrase it, in KZN. And I think they wanted to secure that and be sure of that. And what's been interesting, I mean, I was having a conversation just outside with somebody who was saying the way in which the MK had the votes, they were so few seats away from the majority that had they actually put together a government the day after the election in KZN, they would have actually secured that majority. But because they took the time and initially rejected the entire process, they found themselves in this. And so I think they knew.
We are going to go there in a second. I just want us to stay with the ANC just for a few seconds, and we don't have a great deal of time, by the way, but I just want to stay with the ANC a little bit, and for one reason, certainly for the purpose of the conversation you and I are having right now as we're wrapping up, and it is that for the longest time, I mean, I don't know how many times we've heard the word transactional discussions, transactional conversations. The ANC had pains trying to, insisting that all the conversations it's been having in the main with both the Democratic Alliance and the IFP have not been transactional. But of course, the election of the National Assembly Speaker, the Deputy, the President, and today the Chairperson and Deputy of the National Council of Provinces actually suggests the opposite.
Yeah, you remember, Vuyo, I actually laughed the day after the previous briefing when you mentioned this, idea that they were saying it's not transactional, because it is politics. There's no such thing as not transactional.
And that's what negotiations are about
exactly.
anyway.
So I think what they mean when they say it's not transactional, they mean you can't, as the party that's negotiating with them, come already with things in mind that are red line that they may not be willing or interested in giving up. And I think,
isn't it the nature of negotiations that you
course.
come with your positions, and then the other party or parties can accept or reject your propositions?
Of course,
it's in the nature.
This is the nature of the thing. But my sense and what I'm thinking and hearing, and also having looked at what has happened, is that I think where the EFF, for example, made a mistake is that it went in saying they wanted the finance minister, they wanted the MEC in Ekukholeni, already said, potentially even before they heard what it was that the ANC was willing to give them and what it was that the ANC was willing to give up. Whereas when you listen to the DA and what it was that they were, engaging in, they seem to have put aside all ideological conversations and said, okay, let's hear what you have to say and what you are willing to give up. And we still don't know, by the way, what they have given up. And I was just saying earlier that, again, that, for me, what's going to be interesting is not just this coming together of these, previous political foes, but it is what it is that has been given up in order to make this happen from both parties, because we're already seeing a glimpse into the fact that I think they didn't quite discuss non-racialism and what non-racialism is, because we've seen Helen Zille, who's the federal chair of the DA, on Twitter particularly slamming Sky News, slamming BBC News, and basically accusing them of having a race-based lens, to how the coalitions are going. But when you listen and you hear what has been said by these media organizations, it actually is the correct analysis of what's happening, because the DA is a white minority party and it is a political party that looks after white interests. And of course, it does raise questions when the African National Congress, which is a political party that has for the longest time said it looks after the main interests of the black majority and the liberation of the black majority, it raises questions when they do come together, because the question is, under what purposes are they coming together, and how are they going to deal with the elephant in the room, that their departure points on this issue of race in South Africa are miles apart. The DA is coming from a position where they say race should no longer be an issue, we should be looking rather at class. And the ANC says, no, it is still about race, it is still about the fact that the majority of black people are the ones who are poor and the majority of white people are the ones who are rich. And so how are you going to put together this government when you can't even agree what the main question in South Africa is, what the main issue of South Africa is? That's what's going to be interesting for me to hear.
Now, I'm not going to ask you to answer the very questions you are posing, but I'm going to ask you whether then, with everything you've just said and using your tools of analysis, whether you think the DA is in it for the long haul. Are they going to go the distance?
I think that question depends on what it is that we think motivated the DA to make this deal. So my analysis of why the DA is making this deal is because they looked at the lay of the land much faster than the MK, and they realized that if there is chaos at a national level in South Africa, their white maker dream, because that's what they're building, their white maker dream of the Western Cape, a global hub maker for white people from all over, including South Africa, is not going to be realized. You must remember that we've heard that a third of the people who left in South Africa as far back as 1990 have come back. They need a home, they need a place, and they need a place that works like the Europe that they're used to, that has, that's a South Africa that's familiar to them. And the Western Cape provides that. But if there's chaos at a national level, they will not be able to realize this dream. And I think that's what pushed them, and that's why they're willing to give up KZN, and they were willing to give up, even the ideological arguments around Palestine and Israel and the various other things that they are yet to finalize discussions on.
Okay. What becomes of the EFF in the event that tunadering between the ANC and the DA succeeds, at least for some time?
Well, I think, that's a question that has been bugging my mind. And in particular, I'll give you an illustration of where the EFF may find itself in trouble. if part of what the ANC and the DA have agreed on is that they're going to shift the NSFAS from being a grant to being a loan, it puts the EFF on a back burner, because the EFF has young people who are in NSFAS who went to vote for the EFF and not for the ANC. And so these people are no longer the constituency of the ANC, but they are the EFF's constituency. And if the deal between the ANC and the DA is such that those things get converted into loans and you run into a 2025 where young people don't have grants, the EFF is going to have to figure out how to defend NSFAS staying a grant without supporting the ANC, without, doing all of the stuff that it's used to doing. And it's going to be tough because they will lose that constituency if they cannot retain that and if they cannot fight for that.
And the MK party?
The MK party it's such an interesting one for me, because they had the right to govern technically in KZN and they kind of threw that away, and that's why the coalition that's emerging, potentially future government of national unity, won. And I think what's interesting for me is that the MK party took us into Zulu nationalism, identity politics type that we don't like in South Africa, and that's not useful for us. But I think in the IFP and even the King making statements, etc., we saw people recognizing the dangers of this and trying to rein and bring everything back to the center. And this has the potential of creating a more cohesive South Africa in the future, and in particular in KZN, because it's a ticking time bomb for us always. I also think that the MK lost out because people are still recovering from job losses in July 2021. They're still recovering from companies that they were not insured, that they couldn't get back after the destruction. And some are still recovering from the breadwinners who died, the 300 people who died when Jacob Zuma and his MK supporters and leaders actually instigated, allegedly, all of what has happened. And so I think that, although a lot of people gave them the power, they didn't take that power, they didn't use it, and they forgot that you cannot borrow anybody power. And once you have power, you need to grab it and use it as per the mandate that you were given. And I fear for them in terms of their future, because if they can't recover and show a strong will to push for whatever it is, because we don't have a manifesto that they want to push for, and whatever it is that the people who voted for them want them to be able to do, they're going to be in trouble. But of course, one of the things that's happening to them is, it's a new party. There's going to be a lot of chaos before it becomes a normal party, just like Hope, just like many of the others. And so maybe they'll become something, or they will be completely destroyed, because Jacob Zuma doesn't seem interested in power anymore. And I don't understand how.
Asanda Ngoasheng, thank you very much for your time and insights. Really, really appreciate it. And that's it from me and the rest of the crew who have spent the past few days here in Cape Town, of course, both ahead and during the proceedings, both the National Council of Provinces today and, of course, the National Assembly yesterday. We look forward to engaging with you over the next few days as we build up towards, of course, Wednesday's inauguration, which on this channel we're bringing to you live with all the implications, of course, that too has. For now, though, we're going to take you back to our headquarters in Johannesburg, and at the top of the hour, Masa will be back with your headlines and, of course, the rest of the news, views, and analysis for the day.